Jesus Christ in Matthew 5 clearly said that think not that I have come to destroy or displace the law. He has not come to destroy but to fulfill. Which leads us on to an important question, the 41st question, which is, what is the sum of the Ten Commandments? In other words, what is the main teaching or the main point of the Ten Commandments? The sum or the main point of the Ten Commandments is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our strength, and with all our mind, and our neighbour as ourselves. The law of God not only points us to loving God and our neighbour, and we know this in the two tables of the law. The first 4 commandments have reference to our obedience and responsibility to God, and then the remaining 6 have reference to our responsibility to our neighbour. But not only does the law and the Ten Commandments point in that direction, but it also reminds us that we are unable to do this. We are completely unable to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength and mind, and indeed our neighbour as ourself. So as we come to the law of God, as we come to the moral law, as we come to the Ten Commandments, we know what it requires, but we are reminded then that we cannot do it, which is also a point of the law. The law is given so that we might realize that we cannot obey it, and that we might go somewhere else for our acceptance with God. In Matthew 22:37-40 we read, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets." And we see here in this last verse, the 40th verse of Matthew 22, that you have that principle of the 2 great commandments, and then underpinning those, the 10 commandments, underpinning those, you have the whole moral law in Scripture. They are all related to one another. But let's apply this to ourselves as we just want to make it applicable, of course. Even though we cannot, of course, love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength and mind, yet we are to constantly strive to do so. It is to be the purpose of our life. Again, it brings us back to question 1, the chief end of man, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. This is to be our constant, not only desire and prayer, but everything we do is to lead us in this direction, to love God and to love one another, to make a reference to the message to come in this service. Everything we are to do and everything we are to be is in this question of the Catechism. In fact, this is as substantial and as foundational as the first question in the Catechism. This is foundational. There's no point in talking about the law of God if it is not going to lead us to doing this, or if it's not going to remind us of our need for the righteousness of Christ. These are the 2 great reasons for the law: to incite us and to encourage us to love God, but then remind us that we cannot do it by ourselves, but we can only do it in the strength of Christ. Now think about that. If the law no longer applies, those 2 great purposes of the law are removed. So the modern evangelical church that tells us that the moral law is no longer binding removes from us two great principles that we need in the Christian life. The responsibility to love God, because if the moral law is gone and if it has been abrogated, well, then we're no longer responsible to love God. That is the consequence. You cannot say that the moral law no longer applies and then still in the same breath say that we are responsible to love God. We are responsible to love God because the moral law still stands. And it will not do to say that the New Testament replaces the moral law. To say the moral law replaces the moral law makes no sense at all. To say one moral replaces another moral is not biblical. No, God's law remains the same. God's character remains the same. And that is the basis of our responsibilities. So what is the sum of the Ten Commandments? The sum of the Ten Commandments is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our strength, and with all our mind, and our neighbour as ourselves. And may God help us to do so.